Imagine your son's bride deliberately destroying your family's priceless recipe book for social media clout, smirking, "It's just paper." Then you expose her as a serial con artist right after their vows, in front of 200 guests. If this betrayal boils your blood, hit like if you think she deserved every second of that wedding day takedown. Thank you, Eliza, for giving me this space to share my story. It's been a long road, but telling it here feels like finally setting the table right. Let's dive in. The servers move like clockwork through the reception hall, each carrying a silver tray of sealed cream envelopes. I stand at the head table, my hands folded calmly in my lap, watching my son's new wife realize that her perfect day is about to become her worst nightmare. "This is fake." Madison's voice cuts through the gentle clinking of champagne glasses and murmured conversations. Her face has gone white beneath her carefully applied makeup, and she's clutching one of the envelopes like it might bite her. Someone's trying to sabotage our wedding. But the guests are already opening their envelopes. I can see their faces changing, confusion melting into shock, then disgust. Mrs. Patterson from David's office covers her mouth with her hand. Madison's supposed college roommate slowly sets down her champagne flute, her eyes wide. Security moves in smoothly. I'd arranged for extra personnel, just in case. As they escort Madison toward the exit, her designer heels clicking frantically against the marble floor, she turns back to scream at me. But I just smile serenely and raise my own champagne glass in a small toast. David looks stunned, frozen in his chair beside me. My heart breaks a little for him, watching his world shatter in real time. But sometimes, a mother has to hurt her child to save him from something worse. Some dishes are a slow braise, this one was a flash fry. 6 weeks ago, my penthouse kitchen smelled like heaven. Vanilla and cinnamon danced in the air while David and I worked side by side, flour dusting our hands as we shaped the delicate dough for my grandmother's special donuts. Sunday cooking lessons had been our tradition since he was 8 years old, the one thing that survived his teenage rebellion, college years, and now his busy career as a financial advisor. "The secret is in the ricotta," I told him, watching his careful fingers form the perfect little donuts. "Your great-grandmother used to say that cheese holds memories. Every batch carries forward the love of the women who made it before." David laughed, that warm sound that still made my heart swell with pride. "Mom, you're getting philosophical about cheese again." When you've spent 30 years in professional kitchens, everything becomes philosophical. I dusted powdered sugar over the golden pastries, watching them transform into small clouds of sweetness. Besides, this isn't just cheese. This is our history. The original recipe book lay open between us, handwritten pages yellowed with age, stained with decades of use. My grandmother's careful script documented not just ingredients and techniques, but stories. Margin notes about rationing during the war, a pressed flower from her wedding day, the date she first made these pastries in her new home, homesick and hopeful. "I want you to have this," I said, touching the worn leather cover. "When you get married, when you have children of your own, this should be in your kitchen." David's eyes grew serious. "Mom, I can't take your recipe book. It's your whole career, your legacy." "My legacy isn't in these pages, sweetheart. It's in you." I squeezed his flour-dusted hand. "This recipe survived wars and heartbreak. It's yours now." He pulled me into a hug that smelled like vanilla and home. And for a moment, everything in my world was exactly as it should be. 2 weeks later, I met Madison for the first time at Le Bernardin. David had chosen the restaurant carefully, neutral territory where his chef mother might feel comfortable. The private dining room glowed with soft candlelight, fresh orchids adorning each table, the kind of understated elegance that whispered rather than shouted its expense. Madison was beautiful, I'll give her that. Honey blonde hair that caught the light, a smile that seemed genuine, a way of touching David's arm that spoke of easy intimacy. She wore a simple black dress that probably cost more than most people's rent, and she ordered the wine with confidence. "I'm so excited to finally meet you," she said, leaning forward with apparent enthusiasm. "David talks about you constantly, the famous chef mother." I smiled and asked the usual getting-to-know-you questions. "Where was she from?" "Portland," she said. "What did she do?" "Marketing consulting." "How did she and David meet?"
a coffee shop in Soho. But then the small inconsistencies started piling up. She claimed to love hiking the Oregon trails, but when I mentioned the specific beauty of Multnomah Falls, a landmark any Portland native would know, she just nodded vaguely and changed the subject. She ordered the lamb despite mentioning earlier that she was vegetarian. When David brought up her supposed college years at Reed, she deflected with a laugh about boring old stories. My chef's instincts kicked in, the same ones that could tell when a sauce was about to break or when a sous chef was lying about following proper food safety protocols. Something was off about Madison's recipe, and I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. "These old-world traditions are so quaint," Madison said when David mentioned our Sunday cooking sessions, "but David and I are building something modern." The way she said "old world" made it sound like a polite insult, and the way David's face fell slightly, just for a second, told me everything I needed to know about how this conversation had gone before. I smiled and nodded and played the part of the charmed future mother-in-law, but inside, my maternal instincts were sharpening like a honed knife. 3 weeks before the wedding, I sat in my home office surrounded by cookbooks and restaurant awards, holding a business card that felt heavier than it should. James Chen, private investigator. I'd gotten his name from my restaurant's legal team, a man who specialized in background checks with absolute discretion. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed his number. This felt like a betrayal of David's trust, but something Madison had said at dinner kept echoing in my mind. When I'd mentioned the family recipe book, her eyes had lit up in a way that had nothing to do with culinary interest and everything to do with dollar signs. "Ms. Popescu," Chen's voice was calm, professional. "What can I do for you?" I gave him Madison's full name, her supposed background, everything David had told me about her. "I need to know if she is who she says she is," I said simply. "Standard background check runs about $1,500. If you need deeper investigation." "Money isn't an issue, I just need the truth." After I hung up, my phone rang immediately. Roberto's name flashed on the screen, my former sous chef who'd worked with me for 15 years before opening his own place in Brooklyn. "Elena, mi amor, how are you holding up?" His warm voice carried the slight accent of his Puerto Rican childhood. "David told me about the engagement. You must be so excited." "I am," I said, though the words felt hollow. "Roberto, can I ask you something? If someone threatened everything you'd built, everything you'd worked for, what would you do?" There was a long pause. "I'd remember that you taught me to always taste the ingredients before adding them to the dish. Some things that look sweet are actually poison." "Thank you, Roberto. It's good to know that after all these years, my kitchen family is still my family." "Always, chef, always." The rehearsal dinner at Millbrook Country Club was everything Madison had dreamed of. White roses cascading from crystal centerpieces, traditional American folk art I'd specially commissioned adorning the walls, the kind of elegant perfection that would photograph beautifully for her social media. I'd brought a recipe book with me, one that looked exactly like my precious original. Same worn leather cover, same yellowed pages, same careful handwriting. But this one was a replica I'd made years ago for a cookbook deal that never materialized. "I wanted to share something special tonight," I announced, standing with the book in my hands. "This contains 5 generations of our family's recipes. When David was born, I knew that someday this would be his, along with the trust fund his father established, worth about $2 million. I watched Madison's face carefully as I mentioned the money. James Chen's initial report had already revealed that she'd run credit checks on David within a week of meeting him. The way her eyes sharpened at the number told me everything I needed to know about her priorities. "David will inherit both when he marries," I continued, opening the book to show the handwritten pages. "This book is our family's heart. Every recipe tells the story of who we are." I set it carefully on the dessert station, knowing Madison would be drawn to it like a moth to flame. The bait was set. Now I just had to wait. It happened during the toasts, just as I'd predicted. Madison had been circling the dessert station all evening, her eyes constantly drifting to the recipe book. When she thought no one was looking, she approached with a glass of red wine in her hand. I watched from across the room as she accidentally bumped into the table. The wine arced through the air in a perfect crimson splash, soaking the pages I'd spent weeks artificially aging. For just a moment, barely a heartbeat, her face showed pure triumph, a smirk that revealed exactly who she really was. Then, like an actress stepping into character, her expression shifted to theatrical horror. "Oh my God, Elena, I'm so sorry," she cried out, loud enough for everyone to hear. But she leaned close to whisper in my ear, her voice cold as winter. "Relax, it's just paper." The cruelty in those words, delivered with that barely concealed smirk, hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate attack on everything I held sacred, performed for an audience that would see only her fake remorse and my genuine pain. I met her gaze and offered a serene, tight-lipped smile. "Accidents happen," I said, my voice perfectly even. I accepted her loud, performative apologies, letting her believe she'd won. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. The last of my doubt evaporated, replaced by something much more dangerous: certainty. That night, alone in my bedroom, I discovered the full scope of Madison's cruelty. She'd live-streamed the entire accident to her thousands of followers, narrating it like entertainment. "Watch this," her voice said through my phone screen as I stared at the video in horror. "David's mom is literally crying over some worthless old paper. She's completely unhinged. These people with their precious, family heirlooms, it's just a book." The comments were brutal. Strangers calling me pathetic, dramatic, old-fashioned. The video had been shared hundreds of times, each share spreading the humiliation further. Madison had turned the destruction of my family's legacy into content, into clout, into a viral moment at my expense. I set the phone down with steady hands, but inside, everything had crystallized into perfect, cold clarity. The heartbreak was still there, for David, for the trust that had been shattered, for the future I'd imagined for my son. But it was now wrapped in something much more powerful. Madison wanted to play with fire in a professional kitchen. It was time to show her how a real chef handles the heat. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to James Chen. It was time to accelerate his investigation. The wedding was in 1 week, and I had work to do. 5 days before the wedding, I stood outside David's apartment door with a manila envelope in my hands, my heart hammering against my ribs. Inside were printed screenshots of Madison's livestream, her cruel posts, every piece of evidence of her true nature. This was my last chance to reach my son before it was too late. David answered the door in his work clothes, tie loosened, looking exhausted. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I said, stepping inside the familiar space. His apartment still smelled like the vanilla candles I'd given him last Christmas, and our Sunday cooking sessions felt like a lifetime ago. About Madison. I spread the screenshots across his coffee table like evidence in a courtroom. The livestream comments, the viral video, her smirking face as she called our family legacy just a book. Each image was a knife twist, but I forced myself to stay calm. "David, look at these, really look at them." My voice was steady, but my hands trembled slightly. This is what she did after destroying the recipe book. She turned it into entertainment. David stared at the papers, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and something that might have been doubt. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I'd reached him. "She live-streamed my pain, sweetheart. She made strangers laugh at your mother's heartbreak." "Mom, David started, but the apartment door opened behind us. Madison swept in like she owned the place, her designer handbag swinging from her shoulder. The moment she saw the screenshots scattered across the table, her expression shifted through surprise, calculation, and then, with the speed of a seasoned performer, devastation. "Oh my God, David, she's still doing this?" Madison's voice cracked with perfectly pitched distress. "I can't believe she's harassing me online, taking screenshots, stalking my social media accounts. I'm so scared." She sank into the chair beside David, one hand pressed to her chest, the other reaching for him. "I made one mistake, one accident, and she's been cyber-stalking me ever since. She even hired people to follow me. I've been getting calls from strangers asking about my background, my past." My blood ran cold. She knew about James Chen's investigation. Somehow, she'd figured out I was digging into her history. "That's not," I began, but Madison cut me off with a sob that would have won an Oscar. "David, I didn't want to tell you this, but..." She took a shuddering breath, her free hand moving to her stomach in a gesture so subtle I almost missed it. "I'm pregnant." The words hit the room like a bomb. David's face went white, then flushed with a mixture of joy and panic. "Pregnant? Madison, are you sure?" She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks with perfect timing. "I just found out yesterday. I was going to surprise you after the wedding, but with all this stress, with your mother hiring strangers to stalk me while I'm carrying your child." She looked directly at me, and for just a second, I saw the calculation behind her tears. What kind of grandmother threatens her own grandchild? David turned to me, and I saw my son disappearing behind a wall of protective fury. "Mom, is this true? Did you hire someone to investigate Madison?" "David, she's lying about." "Answer the question." His voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it directed at me. "Did you hire a private investigator to spy on my pregnant fiancé?" I looked at Madison's triumphant face, at my son's growing anger, at the trap closing around me with surgical precision. "Yes, but..." "Get out." David's voice was cold, final. "Get out of my apartment, and don't come back until you're ready to apologize to Madison and mean it." "David, please, just listen." I said get out. He was shouting now, his face red with rage. "You want to know what kind of grandmother threatens her own grandchild, the kind who's not welcome in that child's life. Apologize to Madison right now, or you're not my mother anymore." The ultimatum hung in the air like a blade. I looked at my son, my beautiful, brilliant, blind son, and saw that Madison had already won this battle. Any words I spoke now would only drive him further away. I gathered the screenshots with dignity I didn't feel, my hands steady despite the earthquake in my chest. "I love you, David, more than you'll ever know." As I reached the door, I heard Madison's voice, sweet as poisoned honey. "I forgive you, Elena, for the baby's sake." 3 days before the wedding, I sat across from James Chen in a small cafe in Queens, far from any place David or Madison might accidentally find us. Chen looked like he hadn't slept in days, his usually immaculate appearance rumpled, his eyes bright with the intensity of a man who'd uncovered something significant. "I have to admit, Ms. Popescu, this case has been educational." He slid a thick folder across the table. "Your instincts were correct. Madison Blair doesn't exist." My coffee grew cold as Chen walked me through the evidence. Real name, Michelle Brennan. Born in Detroit, not Portland. No college degree from Reed or anywhere else. A trail of debt, failed relationships, and increasingly sophisticated cons stretching back nearly a decade. "She targets men with inheritance potential," Chen explained, pointing to a timeline he'd constructed. "Usually older men, widowers with assets, but David represents an evolution in her technique, younger, more trusting, with a family she could manipulate." "The pregnancy?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Fake ultrasound. You can buy them online for $50. Chen's voice carried professional disgust. "She's used the same trick twice before. The miscarriage usually happens right after the wedding, once she's secured access to joint accounts." My hands clenched into fists. How many families has she destroyed? "That we can prove? 4. But here's the thing, Ms. Popescu, she's careless on the phone. We've secured a recording of her bragging to an old associate about the plan. She mentions your son by name, discusses the timeline for accessing his inheritance, even jokes about the pathetic old cookbook lady." Chen pulled out a small recording device. He handed me a small, encrypted USB drive. "Keep this safe. You never know when you'll need a backup." He continued, "She's not just a gold digger, Elena. She's a professional family destroyer. And she's about to make the biggest mistake of her criminal career." I stared at the device, knowing it contained the evidence that could save my son. But I also knew David would never listen to it. Not now, not when Madison had convinced him I was the villain in this story. "There's something else," Chen continued. "Michelle Brennan has a pattern. She doesn't just disappear after the con. She burns everything down, ruins reputations, destroys family relationships, makes sure her victims can never recover what they've lost. She enjoys the destruction as much as the money." The cafe suddenly felt too small, too warm. "What are you saying?" I'm saying that even if we expose her now, she'll find a way to hurt your son on her way out. She's vindictive, and she's had weeks to plan her exit strategy. Chen leaned forward, his voice dropping. But there might be another way, if we wait, if we let her think she's won. She could reveal her true nature herself, I finished, understanding beginning to dawn. At the wedding, in front of everyone. It's risky, Chen warned. But it might be the only way to save your relationship with your son and expose her completely. I thought about David's face when he'd thrown me out of his apartment, about Madison's smirk as she'd played the victim. What do you need from me? 2 days before the wedding, I stood outside the bridal suite at the Plaza Hotel, holding a peace offering that felt like swallowing glass. Inside the elegant gift box was a vintage silver bracelet, something appropriately expensive and meaningless, the kind of gesture that would look good for the cameras. I'd practiced this performance in my mirror for hours, perfecting the defeated posture, the trembling voice, the broken spirit of a mother who'd lost everything. When Madison opened the door, I let her see exactly what she wanted to see. Elena, she was radiant in her silk robe, her hair in rollers, surrounded by the controlled chaos of wedding preparation. What are you doing here? I came to apologize, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, and to bring you this. I held out the gift box with hands that shook just enough to be believable. I was wrong about everything. I hope you can forgive me. Madison's smile was sharp as a blade, but she stepped aside to let me in. The suite was an explosion of white, dress bags, flower arrangements, makeup cases scattered across every surface. The scent of expensive perfume hung in the air like a victory celebration. I'm glad you came to your senses, Madison said, closing the door behind us. The bridesmaids had stepped into the bedroom, giving us privacy that I desperately needed. David was so hurt by your behavior. I know, I kept my eyes down, playing the part of the chastened mother. I was just protective, foolish. I see now that you make him happy. Madison moved closer, and I could feel her satisfaction radiating like heat. You know, Elena, I actually feel sorry for you. All those years building your little restaurant empire, thinking you were so important, so untouchable. She picked up a champagne flute from the side table, swirling the golden liquid with casual arrogance. But here's the thing about old-world traditions, they don't matter anymore. David doesn't need your dusty recipes or your precious family stories. He needs someone who understands the modern world. Of course, I murmured, letting her see my defeat. You're right. The trust fund alone is $2 million, Madison continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But David's been conservative with his estimates. The restaurants, the real estate, even the rights to your cookbook deals, we're looking at closer to $5 million total, maybe more. My blood turned to ice, but I kept my expression neutral. I just want David to be happy. Madison laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. Happy? David will be whatever I need him to be, just like you are right now, completely irrelevant. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a cruel whisper. You should have just stayed in your kitchen where you belonged, old woman. The words hit their mark perfectly, and I let them. I let Madison see the pain flash across my face, let her believe she delivered the killing blow. When I left the suite 5 minutes later, I was hunched with apparent defeat, clutching my purse like a lifeline. But inside that purse was my phone, and inside my phone was a perfect recording of everything Madison had just confessed. James Chen had been right. She was careless when she thought she'd won. As the elevator doors closed, I straightened my shoulders and allowed myself one small smile. Madison thought she'd destroyed me, but she'd just given me everything I needed to destroy her. The wedding was in 2 days. It was time to prepare the final course. I sit in my home office at 3 a.m, one day before the wedding that will destroy my son's life. The silence presses against me like a physical weight. My restaurant awards line the shelves, James Beard, Michelin stars, recognition from a lifetime of perfection, but they feel like artifacts from someone else's life now. The family photos mock me from their silver frames. David at 8, flower in his hair, laughing as we made his first batch of grandmother's donuts. David at graduation, his arm around me, proud to call me his mother. David last month, before Madison poisoned everything between us, when he still looked at me with love instead of disgust. My phone hasn't rung in 2 days. The silence is deafening. I've tried calling him 17 times. Each attempt goes straight to voicemail. His voice, recorded in happier times, cheerfully asking callers to leave a message. I can't bring myself to speak after the beep anymore. What words could possibly bridge the chasm Madison has carved between us? The restraining order papers sit on my desk, delivered this afternoon by a process server who couldn't meet my eyes. David's signature at the bottom, legally forbidding me from contacting him or Madison. My own son has made me a stranger, a threat to be managed by the courts. I pick up the real recipe book, the one Madison thinks she destroyed, and run my fingers over the worn leather cover. 5 generations of women's love and sacrifice reduced to evidence in a legal battle I'm losing. The irony tastes bitter as burnt garlic. I saved the book but lost my son. Outside, New York sleeps while I plan what might be my final act as David's mother. The wedding is in 18 hours. After that, Madison will have won completely. The money, the man, and the satisfaction of destroying everything I've built. I close my eyes and see Madison's smirk as she whispered those cruel words. It's just paper. The memory still burns like touching a hot pan, but now, in the darkness of my defeat, something else burns brighter. Either I become the monster in his love story, or I watch the real monster write his ending. The choice has been made for me. If I'm going to lose my son anyway, I'll make sure he knows the truth about the woman he's marrying, even if he never forgives me for it. Wedding morning arrives gray and drizzling, as if the sky itself mourns what's about to happen. I sit in my hotel room at the plaza, 3 floors below where Madison is probably having her hair done, and stare at my phone screen in growing horror. The recording I made in the bridal suite, Madison's confession about the money, her cruel words about David, has vanished. The file is corrupted, unplayable as if it never existed. My hands shake as I try everything. Different apps, cloud backups, even calling James Chen to see if he has a copy. I'm sorry, Elena. His voice is grim through the phone. The file on my end is corrupted too. It's like someone with serious technical skills got to both our devices. I set the phone down with steady hands, but inside, everything crumbles. Madison didn't just outplay me, she made me destroy myself. Every move I've made, every piece of evidence I've gathered, has been turned into proof of my own instability. The pregnancy lie was genius in its simplicity. Fake ultrasounds are easy to obtain, but impossible to disprove without seeming like a monster. What kind of grandmother demands medical records from her pregnant daughter-in-law? What kind of mother accuses her son's wife of faking a pregnancy? The live stream of the book destruction has been edited now, I realize. The cruel commentary removed, leaving only Madison's apparent distress and my genuine pain. To any viewer, it looks like an unfortunate accident and a woman overreacting to the loss of an old book. Even my hiring of James Chen has been weaponized against me. Madison's tears about being stalked and harassed while pregnant paint me as unhinged, dangerous. Every step I took to protect my son has become evidence that I'm the threat he needs protection from. I walk to the window and look down at 5th Avenue, where early morning joggers dodge puddles and taxis splash through intersections. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that 3 floors above them, a master manipulator is putting the finishing touches on a perfect con. She didn't just steal my son's money. She stole my son's love, my reputation, my place in his life. And she did it by making me complicit in my own destruction, turning my maternal instincts into weapons against myself. But as I stand there, watching the city wake up, something crystallizes in my chest. Madison made one crucial mistake. She thinks this is over. She thinks I'm defeated, broken, ready to slink away in shame. She's about to learn what happens when you corner a chef who's spent 30 years in professional kitchens. We don't break under pressure. We use it. At 11 a.m., I sit across from Petra Vasquez in the hotel restaurant, my hands wrapped around a coffee cup that's gone cold. Petra was my protégé once, a brilliant young chef I'd mentored through her early career. Now she owns 3 restaurants in Manhattan and has her own James Beard Award. I'd called her this morning, hoping for an ally, someone who might help me reach David. Instead, I'm watching my professional family abandon me too. Elena, I've been hearing things, Petra says carefully, her dark eyes filled with something that looks uncomfortably like pity. About you hiring investigators, making accusations. Roberto called me yesterday, worried about you. My heart sinks. Roberto, my loyal sous chef for 15 years, worried about me. Not worried for me, worried about what I might do next. It's not what it looks like, I begin, but Petra holds up a hand. Chef, I've seen the videos. The way you reacted to that accident with the book. She leans forward, her voice gentle but firm. Maybe it's time to step back. You taught us that when a dish isn't working, sometimes you have to start over. The words hit like a physical blow. My own lessons, my own wisdom, being used to suggest I need to step away from my son's life. The irony would be funny if it weren't so devastating. Petra, she's not who she claims to be. I have evidence. Evidence that got you served with a restraining order? Petra's voice carries the authority she's learned in her own kitchens now. Elena, you're one of the greatest chefs I've ever known. You taught me precision, patience, the importance of timing. But this isn't precise. This is desperate. I look around the restaurant, at the familiar rhythm of service, the dance of servers and kitchen staff that once defined my world. These people were my colleagues, my industry family. Now they see me as a cautionary tale, the aging chef who couldn't let go, who lost perspective, who let personal drama destroy her professional reputation. The wedding is in 3 hours, Petra continues. David is marrying the woman he loves, and you're sitting here trying to convince me she's some kind of criminal mastermind. Do you hear yourself? I do hear myself. I hear how I sound to someone who doesn't know what I know, who hasn't seen what I've seen. I sound exactly like what Madison has painted me to be, an unhinged mother who can't accept her son's choice. Petra reaches across the table and squeezes my hand. I love you, Elena, we all do, but maybe it's time to get some help. Professional help, before you lose David completely. After she leaves, I sit alone in the restaurant, surrounded by the sounds of a world that's moved on without me. My phone buzzes with text messages from other former colleagues, all expressing concern about my recent behavior. The whisper network in the restaurant industry moves fast, and apparently, I'm now the subject being whispered about. Madison hasn't just isolated me from my son. She systematically destroyed my entire support network, turning my reputation into evidence of my instability. In 3 hours, she'll have everything she wanted, and I'll have nothing left but the bitter taste of defeat. At 12:30 p.m., 90 minutes before the ceremony, I'm hunched over a computer in the hotel's business center, my hands shaking as I dial Thomas Kellerman's number. He's one of Madison's previous victims from James Chen's report, a widower from Connecticut who lost his house and his savings to her 3 years ago. The video call connects, and I see a man in his 60s, tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, sitting in what looks like a modest apartment. When I'd called him yesterday, he'd agreed to help, to provide testimony about Madison's real identity. He was my last hope, my final card to play. Mr. Kellerman, thank you for agreeing too. I can't do this, he interrupts, his voice strained. I'm sorry, Ms. Popescu, but I can't help you. My heart stops. What do you mean? Yesterday you said. Yesterday I hadn't received certain communications. His eyes dart nervously off camera. I've been reminded of certain legal vulnerabilities in my situation. Accusations I could face if I were to make false statements about Ms. Blair. They're not false statements. You told me yourself what she did to you. I was mistaken, he says quickly, the words obviously rehearsed. I confused her with someone else. Michelle Brennan was never involved in my financial difficulties. Any suggestion otherwise would be. The screen goes black, the call has ended. I stare at the blank monitor, my reflection ghost-like in the dark screen. Thomas Kellerman was my proof, my witness, my evidence that Madison had done this before. Now he's gone, scared into silence by threats I can only imagine. I try calling James Chen, but it goes straight to voicemail. When I try his office, his assistant tells me he's unavailable and cannot comment on ongoing investigations. The careful tone tells me everything, he's been warned off too, probably threatened with lawsuits or worse. Madison is 3 steps ahead of me always. She's not just destroying my family, she's destroying everyone who tries to help. Every ally, every piece of evidence, every avenue of attack has been systematically eliminated. I check my watch. 1 hour and 15 minutes until the ceremony begins. 1 hour and 15 minutes until David says, "I do" to a woman who will spend the rest of his life draining him dry, isolating him from anyone who might see through her act, turning him into another Thomas Kellerman, broken, alone, afraid to speak the truth. The business center is empty except for me and the humming of computers. Outside, I can hear the sounds of wedding preparation, florists arranging last-minute details, caterers setting up stations, the string quartet tuning their instruments for the ceremony that will seal my son's fate. I close my eyes and feel the weight of absolute defeat pressing down on me like a collapsed soufflé. Madison has won completely. She has the man, the money, and the satisfaction of watching me destroy myself trying to stop her. But as I sit there in the silence, surrounded by the wreckage of every plan I've made, something shifts inside me. The desperation begins to crystallize into something harder, sharper, more dangerous. I may have lost every battle, but the war isn't over until David says, "I do." And I still have one weapon Madison doesn't know about, the truth, delivered at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right way. It's time to stop playing by her rules. It's time to cook. At 2:00 p.m., I stand in the hotel's catering kitchen, watching Roberto arrange the final touches on the wedding cake display. The kitchen hums with controlled chaos, servers polishing glasses, sous chefs plating appetizers, the familiar symphony of professional food service that once defined my world. "Chef," Roberto says quietly, appearing at my elbow with a concerned expression. "You look like hell." I almost laugh at his bluntness. I feel worse than I look. "What's happening, really?" His voice drops to a whisper. "Sophia told me about the restraining order about David cutting you off. This isn't like you." I look around the kitchen, at the staff who have known me for years, who still call me chef, with respect despite my supposed disgrace. These people understand loyalty, understand family, understand what it means to protect what matters. "Roberto, what if I told you that everything you've heard about me is a lie? That the woman David is marrying is destroying him, and I'm the only one who can stop it?" He studies my face for a long moment, then nods slowly. "I'd say that in 15 years of working for you, I've never seen you wrong about people. Not once." He glances toward the kitchen entrance, then back to me. "What do you need?" The simple question, asked without judgment or hesitation, nearly breaks me. I need my kitchen family to trust me one more time. "Chef, your kitchen, your rules. What do you need?" I pull out my phone and show him the photos I've been preparing all morning, copies of Madison's real background, her criminal history, screenshots of her social media posts mocking David and our family. Everything James Chen uncovered before he was scared into silence. I need these distributed to every guest at the reception, but not until the exact right moment. I meet his eyes. This could destroy my relationship with David forever, but if I don't do this, she'll destroy him completely. Roberto takes the phone, scrolling through the evidence with growing anger. "Dios mío, Elena, this woman, she's poison. Will you help me?" He looks around the kitchen, catching the eye of Sophia, the pastry chef, and Marcus, the head server. One by one, they gather around us, forming a protective circle of loyalty that Madison never researched, never anticipated. "Family protects family," Roberto says simply. "Always." At 6:15 p.m., I stand before 200 wedding guests in the plaza's grand ballroom, holding a champagne flute with steady hands. The reception is in full swing, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over elegantly dressed guests, the string quartet playing softly in the background, Madison radiant in her designer gown as she holds court at the head table. David won't look at me. He's followed the legal requirements by allowing me to attend. I am still his mother, technically, but his face is stone when our eyes accidentally meet. The restraining order means I can't approach him directly, can't speak to him privately. This speech is my only chance. "Ladies and gentlemen," I begin, my voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. As the mother of the groom, I wanted to share a few words about the remarkable woman my son has chosen to marry. Madison's smile is radiant, victorious. She thinks this is my surrender speech, my public acknowledgement of defeat. The guests settle into polite attention, expecting the usual maternal platitudes about love and happiness. Madison has shown me something I never expected to see. I continue, letting warmth flow into my voice. She has a truly remarkable gift for storytelling, the ability to craft narratives so compelling, so detailed, that they become more real than reality itself. A few guests chuckle appreciatively. Madison's smile widens, interpreting this as praise for her charm and charisma. She's taught me that some people possess an extraordinary talent for reinvention, the ability to become exactly who they need to be in any given moment. It's really quite impressive, this capacity for transformation. I pause, letting my words settle. Madison is still smiling, but something flickers in her eyes. She's beginning to sense the undercurrent in my tone. Some would say the time for truth was before the vows. I continue, my voice growing stronger. But I believe true justice, like a perfect meal, must be served to everyone at the table. And timing, as any chef knows, is everything. In my family, we have a beautiful wedding tradition, I announce, setting down my champagne glass. Before the cake is cut, the family shares what we call the sweet truth. It's a palate cleanser for the soul. I signal to Roberto, who appears at the kitchen entrance with a team of servers, each carrying silver trays laden with cream-colored envelopes. The guests murmur with curiosity as the servers begin moving through the room with practiced efficiency. Each envelope contains a family recipe, I explain, my voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. But not just ingredients and instructions. In my grandmother's kitchen, she taught me that the most important ingredient is honesty. Without it, the most beautiful cake is just flour and lies. Madison's face has gone pale. She's watching the servers distribute the envelopes with growing alarm, her hand gripping David's arm tightly. "David, what is this? Stop her." But David is staring at me with confusion rather than anger, perhaps hearing something in my tone that reminds him of the mother he used to trust. "Please, everyone, open your envelopes together," I say, my voice steady as steel. "Let's share this family tradition, the truth served at exactly the right temperature." The sound of 200 envelopes being opened simultaneously fills the ballroom like rustling leaves. I watch faces change as guests read the contents, confusion melting into shock, shock hardening into disgust. The elegant reception atmosphere shifts palpably as the truth spreads through the room like wildfire. "What is this?" someone calls out. "These are criminal records." "Background checks," another voice adds. "Financial fraud, identity theft." Madison lurches to her feet, her face a mask of desperate fury. "This is fake. She's completely unhinged. David, call security." But David is staring at his own envelope, his face cycling through disbelief, recognition, and dawning horror. "The ingredients are simple," I say, my voice cutting through the growing chaos. "One part evidence, one part patience, and a lifetime of knowing when something doesn't taste right." I pull out my phone and connect it to the room's sound system. Madison, or should I say Michelle Brennan, thought she was very clever, but she made one crucial mistake. She underestimated a mother's love. The recording I'd pulled from the encrypted USB drive fills the ballroom. The recording Chen had given me before he was scared into silence, discussing the pathetic cookbook lady and her plans to drain David's inheritance. The trust fund alone is $2 million, but we're looking at closer to $5 million total. Madison's own voice, dripping with greed and contempt, echoes through the stunned silence. "David will be whatever I need him to be. You should have just stayed in your kitchen where you belonged, old woman." The ballroom erupts. Guests are on their feet, pointing and shouting. Phones are out, recording everything. Madison's face has gone from pale to gray, her carefully constructed mask finally slipping completely. "That's not real," she screams, but her voice cracks with desperation. "She doctored it. She's been stalking me, harassing me." "Security," I say calmly into the microphone. "Please escort Ms. Brennan from the premises. Her real name is Michelle Brennan, and there are several outstanding warrants for her arrest in Connecticut and Michigan." Hotel security moves in smoothly. I'd alerted them an hour ago, providing them with copies of everything. As they approach, Madison makes one last desperate play. "David, I'm pregnant with your child. You can't let them do this to your baby." But David is standing now, his face a mixture of rage and heartbreak. "Show me the ultrasound," he says quietly. "What?" "The ultrasound. Show everyone the ultrasound of our baby." Madison's eyes dart around the ballroom like a trapped animal. 200 faces stare back at her with disgust and fascination, phones recording every second of her downfall. The beautiful bride she'd spent months crafting has been stripped away, leaving only the desperate grifter beneath. I don't have it with me," she stammers. "It's in my room, but—" "I had my assistant call your doctor," David says, his voice hollow with betrayal. "Dr. Martinez has no record of you as a patient. The ultrasound you showed me was purchased online for $60. The last of Madison's composure shatters. "You bastard, you investigated me, after everything I've done for you." "Everything you've done to me," David corrects, his voice growing stronger. "How much of it was real, Madison? Any of it?" She looks around the ballroom one more time, seeing only condemnation and disgust. When she speaks again, her voice carries pure venom. "You want the truth? Fine, you're all pathetic. David, you're a boring little man with a boring little life, and your mother is a washed-up has-been who couldn't let go." She points directly at me, her face twisted with rage. "You destroyed everything. I'll sue you for everything you have." "With what money?" I ask calmly. "Your accounts were frozen an hour ago when the FBI received copies of all this evidence." Security takes her arms gently but firmly. As they escort her toward the exit, Madison's designer heels clicking frantically against the marble floor, she turns back to scream one final curse. "This isn't over. I'll destroy all of you." But the ballroom doors close behind her with a soft, final click, cutting off her threats and leaving only stunned silence in her wake. In the quiet that follows Madison's removal, I walk slowly to where David stands frozen at the head table. The restraining order is meaningless now. The woman who filed it is being led away in handcuffs, her legal threats evaporating with her credibility. "The wine-stained book," I say softly, pulling the real recipe collection from my purse. "It was a decoy, sweetheart. The real recipes were always safe." David stares at the familiar leather cover, his eyes filling with tears. "Mom, God, what have I done?" "You fell in love," I say simply. "There's no shame in that. She was very good at what she did." I turn to address the stunned crowd, my voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. "I want to thank James Chen, private investigator, who risked his career to help me gather this evidence. And I want to thank the hotel staff who helped me coordinate tonight's revelation." I pull out my phone one more time. There's one more recording I think you should all hear. This is Michelle Brennan talking to her accomplice about her previous victims. The new audio fills the room, Madison's voice, cold and calculating, discussing the pathetic widowers she'd swindled, laughing about the old fools who trusted her with their life savings. "She's done this before," I continue. "Multiple times. David wasn't her first victim, and without intervention, he wouldn't have been her last." David sinks into a chair, his head in his hands. "How long have you known?" "I suspected from the first dinner. I knew for certain 3 weeks ago." I touch his shoulder gently. "I tried to tell you, but she was always one step ahead. She turned my love for you into evidence against me." The pregnancy announcement, the restraining order. David looks up at me with dawning understanding. "She planned it all." "She's a professional, David. This is what she does. She destroys families, ruins lives, and moves on to the next victim." I kneel beside his chair, taking his hands in mine. "I didn't want to be right, sweetheart. I wanted to be wrong more than anything in the world." 20 minutes later, the ballroom has mostly cleared. Guests have departed with their phones full of footage and their minds full of gossip that will fuel New York society conversations for months. The wedding that was supposed to be Madison's triumph has become her complete destruction. David and I sit alone at the head table, surrounded by the remnants of what should have been his perfect day. The wedding cake stands untouched, a monument to dreams that turned to nightmares. "I threw you out of my apartment," David says quietly, his voice thick with shame. "I chose her over you. I got a restraining order against my own mother. You were protecting someone you loved, I reply, unconsciously touching the small burn scar on my forearm, a mark from my early days as a chef, earned while protecting a careless apprentice from a flaming pan. Sometimes, protecting family from a fire means you have to get burned yourself. David notices the gesture, remembering the story I'd told him years ago about how I'd gotten that scar. This mark, I continue, tracing the old burn with my finger, I got it protecting a young chef who wasn't paying attention. The pan was about to catch him, and I pushed him out of the way. Sometimes, protecting family from a fire means you have to get burned yourself. I am sorry for the pain, sweetheart, but I would get this burn 1,000 times to keep you from being consumed. David breaks down then, tears he's been holding back for weeks finally flowing freely. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry I didn't trust you. I pull him into my arms the way I did when he was 8 years old and had scraped his knee. You have nothing to apologize for. You loved someone, and she used that love against you. That's not your fault. How do I come back from this? How do I trust anyone again? The same way you learn to cook after burning yourself, I say, stroking his hair. Carefully, with patience, and with the knowledge that some burns teach us to be better chefs. We sit in comfortable silence for a moment, mother and son reunited after the storm. Outside, I can hear the sounds of New York continuing its endless rhythm, unaware that in this ballroom, justice has finally been served. What happens now? David asks. Now you heal. Now you remember who you are when you're not being manipulated. Now you come home for Sunday cooking lessons and let me teach you how to make grandmother's donuts the right way. I smile at him, feeling lighter than I have in months. And maybe, someday, you'll find someone who loves you for exactly who you are, not for what you can give them. David nods, wiping his eyes. Will you forgive me? Sweetheart, I say, using the endearment that carries all my love, there's nothing to forgive. Love doesn't keep score. It just keeps cooking, one meal at a time, until everyone at the table is fed. As we stand to leave the wreckage of his almost wedding behind, I think about my grandmother's words, written in the margins of her recipe book. The best dishes come from the worst disasters. Sometimes you have to let everything burn before you can start fresh. Tonight we start fresh. Tonight we go home.
Elena, your story shows us that a mother's instinct is the sharpest tool in the kitchen. Sometimes protecting our loved ones means waiting for the perfect moment to serve the truth, even if it hurts. What would you have done in Elena's shoes? Share in the comments, and if you're moved by this justice, like and subscribe for more. I'm Eliza Quinn, and remember, here on Wedding Day Justice, veils off, justice on.